Some motorcycles are so terrible, you would be a total idiot if you bought one of them. From design catastrophes to bikes breaking down after just a single mile, these are the 15 motorcycles that would make you look like a clown if you owned one. Number 1 is by far the most shameful purchase you could ever make. Starting with number 15 is a 3-wheeled abomination that pretends it's a car, but drives like a drunk shopping cart being pushed by someone having a seizure. The Polaris Slingshot is what happens when someone looks at a perfectly good motorcycle and decides it needs more wheels and less fun, plus the aerodynamics of a refrigerator. This 1,700-pound monstrosity comes with a 2.0-liter engine that produces about 203 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you're hauling around the weight of a small car with none of the practicality. The Slingshot gets a pathetic 30 miles per gallon and costs more than most decent motorcycles, starting around $35,000 for the privilege of looking like you couldn't decide between a motorcycle and a go-kart. So you chose the worst aspects of both. The handling is about as precise as a blindfolded surgeon performing brain surgery during an earthquake, and the ride quality makes a cement mixer seem smooth and refined. You'll spend more time explaining what it is than actually enjoying it, and every real motorcyclist will look at you like you've committed a crime against two-wheeled transportation. The steering wheel feels like it's connected to the front wheels through a series of rubber bands and wishful thinking, and the suspension has all the sophistication of a pogo stick designed by someone who'd never seen one before and was working from a description given by a drunk person. It's the perfect vehicle for someone who wants the worst aspects of both cars and motorcycles combined into one expensive mistake. Hate three-wheelers? Number 14 might be the most lifeless one yet. But there's a reason it's still selling, and it's way dumber than you think. Electric motorcycles are the future, but the Zero SRF is stuck in the present with all the charm of a silent, expensive paperweight that occasionally moves. This $19,000 electric bike promises 176 miles of city range, which translates to about 117 miles combined range in the real world if you actually want to use any of its 113 horsepower, or about 40 miles if you dare to ride it like you actually paid for performance. The SRF weighs 500 pounds and feels every bit of it when you're pushing it to a charging station after it dies 20 miles short of your destination, leaving you stranded like a tourist with a dead phone in a foreign country. The charging time is laughably long. Plan on spending 2.7 hours with the standard charger plugged or hunting down one of the 3 fast chargers in your entire state, assuming they're working and not occupied by someone else having the same brilliant idea. But here's the real kicker. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner having an existential crisis mixed with the gentle hum of a microwave that's given up on life. Half the joy of motorcycling is the sound, the visceral connection between man and machine, and this thing delivers all the auditory excitement of a library during finals week. You'll pay supercar money for the performance of a decent sport bike, with the added bonus of range anxiety that makes every ride feel like a math test you didn't study for, and the constant fear that your expensive toy will become a very heavy brick the moment the battery decides to give up on your relationship. If you thought that three-wheeled disaster was for idiots, number 13 will make you question humanity. Anyone who buys this next bike clearly fails basic common sense. The Eural Gear Up is what happens when someone takes a 1940s design and decides it doesn't need any improvements for the next 80 years, because apparently innovation is for weaklings and people who actually want their vehicles to work properly. This Russian relic comes with a sidecar, whether you want one or not, because apparently the engineers thought 3 wheels were better than 2, even when 2 of them are on the same side like some kind of mechanical birth defect. By a 749cc flat twin engine that produces a whopping 40 horsepower, which is less power than most modern lawnmowers, the Eural struggles to reach highway speeds and gets about 35 miles per gallon despite having the aerodynamics of a brick wall attached to another brick wall. At $18,000, you're paying premium prices for technology that were outdated when your grandfather was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth, or at least when people thought reliability was optional. The build quality is so questionable that breakdowns aren't a possibility. They're a mathematical certainty, like death, taxes, and disappointing sequels. You'll become intimately familiar with roadside repairs and the inside of motorcycle shops, to the point where mechanics will start charging you rent. The handling is terrifying, especially in crosswinds, where the sidecar acts like a sail trying to launch you into the nearest ditch, while the bike argues with physics about which direction it actually wants to go. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks reliability is overrated, enjoys explaining to AA why their motorcycle has 3 wheels, and has a masochistic relationship with mechanical devices. If you think that 80-year-old Russian disaster was for complete morons, number 12 will make your jaw drop. This next bike is ridiculously stupid. Even billionaires with brain damage wouldn't touch it. The Confederate Hellcat is what happens when someone with more money than sense decides to build a motorcycle out of solid billet aluminum and charge supercar prices for the privilege of owning something that looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described through interpretive dance. At over $100,000, this rolling sculpture is less a motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects or financial decisions. This 2,163cc V-twin produces impressive power figures that look great on paper, but good luck using any of it without ending up in a ditch or a hospital. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated refrigerator that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never seen a motorcycle before. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a trip to Starbucks becomes an endurance test that would make Navy SEALs weep, and the suspension is so stiff it makes medieval torture devices seem comfortable and user-friendly. The worst part? It's not even reliable, which is impressive considering how much money they're charging for it. These hand-built nightmares spend more time in the shop than on the road, and when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're showing it off to your equally wealthy and equally foolish friends, you'll need to take out a second mortgage to fix it. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic willing to work on your expensive mistake is like finding a unicorn that's also a certified accountant. You're not buying transportation, you're buying a very expensive conversation piece that occasionally runs and always disappoints. If you thought spending 18 grand on outdated tech was idiotic, number 11 will blow your mind. This next purchase is so dumb, mechanics refuse to work on it. The Arrilia Shiver 900 sounds like it should be exciting, but it's actually named after what you'll do every time you try to start it and realize you've made a terrible mistake. This Italian naked bike promises 95 horsepower from its 896cc V-twin, but what it delivers is a masterclass in electrical gremlins and mechanical frustration that would make a broken printer seem reliable and user-friendly. The Shiver's electronics are more temperamental than a reality TV star having a public meltdown, with random error codes appearing like unwanted guests at a dinner party who refuse to leave and keep eating all your food. The fuel injection system seems to have been calibrated by someone who'd never seen a motorcycle before and was working from instructions written in a language they didn't understand, resulting in jerky throttle response and stalling at the worst possible moments, like when you're trying to impress someone or escape from danger. At 463 pounds, it's not particularly light, and the handling feels disconnected and vague, like you're controlling the bike through a series of suggestions rather than actual mechanical connections. The suspension is either too soft or too hard, never quite right, like a mattress that was designed by committee, and the brakes feel like they're filled with pudding instead of brake fluid, requiring the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or retirement savings. For $11,000, you could buy a reliable Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require a degree in electrical engineering to operate. But instead, you chose Italian frustration with a side of constant maintenance bills and the lingering suspicion that you've been scammed. If you ever meet someone who bought that Italian disaster, slowly back away. But number 10 is such a moronic purchase, it literally bankrupted the company that made it. Bule's final attempt at motorcycle manufacturing resulted in the 1190 RX. a bike that promised American superbike performance but delivered bankruptcy instead, which is like ordering a gourmet meal and receiving a bill for food poisoning. This 185 horsepower monster looked impressive on paper, but in reality, it was a ticking time bomb of mechanical failures and electrical nightmares that would make a haunted house seem predictable and reliable. The 1190RX's unique fuel-in-frame design seemed innovative until you realized it made the bike a fire hazard waiting to happen, like storing gasoline in your living room and hoping for the best. The electronics were so unreliable that riders never knew if the bike would start, run properly, or simply decide to take a nap in the middle of traffic, like a narcoleptic teenager during a boring lecture. But here's the real joke that would make comedians weep with envy. When EBR went bankrupt, part support disappeared faster than your money when you bought this thing, leaving owners stranded with expensive paperweights that occasionally made motorcycle noises. You're now the proud owner of an expensive conversation piece with no factory support, no warranty coverage, and no hope of reliable repairs, making it the perfect bike for someone who enjoys the thrill of never knowing if they'll make it home or if they'll be walking and calling for a tow truck while explaining to their insurance company why their motorcycle is also a fire hazard. If you thought Italian bikes were made for lunatics, number 9 is straight out of a nightmare. It is so mind-numbingly stupid, you'll be begging to wake up. The MV Agusta Brutala 800 is Italian for expensive mistake that will haunt your dreams and empty your wallet. This 140 horsepower naked bike looks absolutely stunning, which is good because you'll be staring at it in your garage more than riding it. Like owning a supermodel who refuses to leave the house, MV Agusta has perfected the art of building beautiful motorcycles that don't actually work, which is impressive in its own tragic way. The Brutale's electronics are more complex than a space shuttle and about as reliable as a chocolate teapot in a sauna, with systems that seem designed by people who think computers are powered by magic and good intentions. The bike suffers from constant sensor failures, mysterious error codes that would baffle NASA scientists, and a fuel injection system that seems to have been programmed by a caffeinated intern who was having a nervous breakdown. Starting the bike is like playing Russian roulette. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you'll never know why, making every ride an adventure in mechanical uncertainty. At $15,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of becoming an unpaid beta tester for a company that apparently thinks quality control is optional. The dealer network is sparse, parts are expensive when you can find them, and every ride becomes an adventure in mechanical uncertainty that makes gambling seem like a safe investment. It's the perfect bike for masochists who think reliability is for peasants and enjoy the thrill of never knowing if their expensive toy will actually function when they need it most. If you ever witness someone defending that bankrupt beauty, call a psychiatrist. However, number 8 is such a monumentally dumb buy, it makes bankruptcy look like success. The Benelli TNT 600i proves that not all motorcycles deserve to exist, and some should have been stopped at the design phase by people with functioning brain cells. This Chinese-built Italian-branded disaster produces 85 horsepower from its 600cc inline-4, which would be respectable if the bike could actually deliver that power reliably without falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The build quality is so poor that it makes discount furniture look well-crafted and professionally assembled. Bolts fall out like they're trying to escape from an abusive relationship, plastics crack from looking at them wrong, and the electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose only experience with electricity came from sticking forks in outlets and wondering why the lights went out. The fuel injection is so poorly mapped that the bike runs like it's powered by hopes and dreams rather than gasoline, creating a riding experience that's more frustrating than trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. At 485 pounds, it's heavier than most 600cc bikes while delivering less performance and reliability than a lawnmower that's been abandoned in a field for several years. The suspension feels like it was filled with concrete by people who thought comfort was a sign of weakness, and the brakes require the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or major life decisions. For the same money, you could buy a used Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require constant prayers to mechanical deities. But apparently, You enjoy disappointment and have a complicated relationship with functional transportation. If you thought that Chinese-Italian Frankenstein was for morons, number 7 will blow your circuits. Anyone who buys this next disaster has clearly failed kindergarten. The Norton Commando 961 is what happens when nostalgia meets modern manufacturing incompetence, creating a perfect storm of disappointment that would make weather forecasters weep. This British bike promised to recapture the glory days of Norton, but instead delivered all the reliability issues of 1970s British engineering with modern prices that would make your accountant file for bankruptcy on your behalf. At $20,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of owning a motorcycle that spends more time broken than running, making it the perfect conversation piece for people who enjoy explaining why their expensive toy doesn't actually work. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic who knows how to work on these things is like finding a competent politician or a unicorn that's also a certified public accountant. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks modern reliability is overrated, enjoys the authentic British experience of constant mechanical failure, and has a masochistic relationship with transportation devices. The Norton Commando 961's electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose understanding of wiring came from untangling Christmas lights while blindfolded and slightly intoxicated. Owners report mysterious electrical gremlins that would baffle even the most experienced technicians, with warning lights that illuminate for no apparent reason and then disappear just as mysteriously, like automotive poltergeists with a sense of humor. The bike's computer system has the reliability of a weather forecast and the user-friendliness of a tax audit, often leaving riders stranded with error codes that require a degree in ancient hieroglyphics to decipher. It's the motorcycle equivalent of buying a beautiful vintage home that looks stunning from the outside but has plumbing installed by someone who thought water flows uphill and electricity is just angry pixies running through copper wires. Number 7 might have been a pretty dumb buy, but as soon as you hear about how stupid it would be to buy number 6, that British revival nightmare starts looking like a smart purchase. The Energica Ego is an electric superbike that costs $24,000 and delivers all the excitement of a very expensive appliance that occasionally moves. This Italian electric bike promises 145 horsepower and a top speed of 150 miles per hour, which is impressive until you realize the range is about 90 miles in real-world conditions, or about 20 minutes if you actually try to use the performance you paid for. The charging infrastructure for this thing is so sparse that planning a trip becomes an exercise in advanced mathematics and prayer, requiring the kind of strategic thinking usually reserved for military operations or chess grandmasters. You'll spend more time looking for charging stations than actually riding, and when you do find one, you'll wait for hours while your bike slowly sips electrons like a geriatric vampire with dietary restrictions, making every journey an exercise in patience that would test the resolve of Buddhist monks. The worst part? It weighs 573 pounds, making it heavier than most gas-powered superbikes, while delivering less range than a Prius driven by someone's grandmother who's afraid of highways. The silence is eerie rather than thrilling, removing the visceral connection between rider and machine that makes motorcycling exciting, and the constant range anxiety turns every ride into a stressful calculation of distance versus battery life that would make accountants nervous. It's the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay supercar prices for the convenience of a golf cart while pretending they're saving the environment one expensive mistake at a time. If you thought paying supercar prices for electric disappointment was idiotic, number 5 will floor you. Anyone who buys this next monstrosity clearly has more money than brain cells. The Ducati Tacy 3D looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described over a bad phone connection by someone who was having a stroke. This hub-center steered monstrosity costs over $40,000 and delivers handling that defies both physics and common sense, creating a riding experience that would confuse professional stunt riders and physics professors alike. The Tacy's unique front suspension system eliminates traditional forks in favor of a complex arrangement of links and pivots that makes the bike handle like it's constantly having an argument with the road about which direction it actually wants to go. The steering feel is so disconnected, you'll wonder if the handlebars are actually connected to anything meaningful, and the feedback is about as informative as a mime having a stroke while trying to explain quantum physics. Powered by a Ducati 1198 engine, it should be fast, but the bizarre chassis dynamics make it feel like you're riding a very expensive science experiment that escaped from a laboratory where mad scientists were trying to prove that conventional motorcycle design was too simple. Parts availability is non-existent, making repairs about as likely as finding affordable healthcare, and when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're trying to explain to someone why your motorcycle looks like it was designed by a committee of drunk engineers, you'll need to mortgage your house to fix it. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too predictable and enjoys the thrill of never knowing which direction they're actually going or whether they'll arrive at their destination in one piece. If you ever meet someone who bought that steering experiment from hell, check their pulse. But number 4 is so mind-numbingly stupid, it makes mad science look sensible. The Virus 987 C34V is what happens when Italian engineers take too much espresso and decide to reinvent the motorcycle wheel while simultaneously proving that having too much money and not enough common sense can create truly spectacular failures. This $40,000 carbon fiber nightmare features hub center steering and a design that looks like it escaped from a dystopian future where motorcycles are built by a committee of people who've never actually seen one in person. The bike uses a Ducati 1198 engine, so it should be fast, but the bizarre chassis makes it handle like a shopping cart with a broken wheel being pushed by someone who's blindfolded and dizzy. The hub center steering provides all the road feel of a video game controller that's been dropped in water, and the riding position seems designed for someone with the proportions of a praying mantis who's been stretched on a medieval torture device. But here's the real kicker that would make comedians weep with envy. Reliability is about as consistent as Italian politics during a government crisis. When something breaks, and it will, probably while you're trying to impress someone with your expensive mistake, you'll discover that parts don't exist in this dimension, and the 3 people in the world who know how to fix it are all on permanent vacation in places without internet access. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too mainstream and enjoys the challenge of riding something that actively fights against basic physics while emptying their bank account. If you thought that was a dumb purchase, just wait until you see number 3. Only people who've hit their head would ever get near that bike. The Arch KRGT1 is Keanu Reeves' motorcycle company's attempt to build the ultimate custom bike. But at $78,000, it's more like the ultimate way to separate fools from their money while proving that celebrity endorsements can't overcome fundamental design flaws. This bespoke cruiser promises handcrafted perfection, but delivers overpriced mediocrity with a celebrity endorsement that costs more than most people's annual salaries. Powered by a 2032cc V-twin that produces 121 horsepower, it's not particularly powerful for its size or price, making it the motorcycle equivalent of paying supercar prices for minivan performance. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated anvil that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never heard of physics. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a photo shoot becomes torture that would make medieval inquisitors take notes, and the suspension is calibrated for show rather than go, prioritizing looks over actual functionality. The worst part? You're paying supercar money for a motorcycle that performs like a decent cruiser with delusions of grandeur and an inflated sense of self-worth. The waiting list is longer than the bike's list of actual innovations, and when you finally get yours after waiting longer than most prison sentences, you'll discover that celebrity involvement doesn't automatically equal quality or value. It's the perfect bike for someone who has more money than sense, thinks paying extra for a famous name makes them special, and enjoys explaining to their friends why their motorcycle costs more than most people's houses, while performing like something half the price. That might have been a pretty stupid buy, but at number 2, we have an even dumber purchase for a reason you won't expect. The Lightning LS2 1.8. claims to be the world's fastest production electric motorcycle, which is like being the tallest building in a town, with no buildings, or the smartest person in a room full of people who think the Earth is flat. At $38,888, this electric superbike promises 200 horsepower and a top speed of 218 miles per hour. But good luck achieving either in the real world without the assistance of divine intervention or a team of engineers with unlimited budgets. The range is laughably short, about 100 miles if you're gentle and ride like your grandmother going to church, or 20 minutes if you actually use the performance it claims to have, making it perfect for very short trips to places with charging stations. The charging time is so long you could learn a new language, write a novel, or complete a college degree while waiting, and the charging infrastructure is so sparse you'll spend more time planning routes around charging stations than actually riding, turning every trip into a mathematical exercise that would challenge NASA scientists. The bike weighs 495 pounds, which is reasonable for an electric bike, but it feels heavy when you're pushing it to the nearest outlet after it dies unexpectedly, like a smartphone with a defective battery. The build quality is questionable at best, with fit and finish that would embarrass a kit car manufacturer who was having a bad day, making it the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay premium prices for the privilege of being stranded with an expensive paperweight that occasionally makes motorcycle noises. And finally, our number one spot represents the absolute pinnacle of motorcycle stupidity, a machine so ridiculously overpriced it makes everything else on this list look reasonable. The Heretic ES1 Superbike is a $3,600,000 monument to automotive insanity that proves money can't buy common sense or good judgment. This titanium-bodied nightmare is less motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects, financial decisions, or anything more complex than a spoon. The Heretic features a 2,409cc V-twin that produces 200 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you could buy 50 decent motorcycles for the same price, or a small island, or a really nice house in most parts of the world. The bike is supposedly limited to 10 units, which is 10 too many for any sane world, and represents 10 opportunities for wealthy people to make spectacularly poor decisions that will be remembered for generations. The titanium construction makes it lighter than you'd expect, but at this price point, it should be made of compressed unicorn tears and powered by pure magic while being assembled by angels who graduated from motorcycle engineering school. The reality is that you're paying millions for a motorcycle that performs about as well as bikes costing 1% of its price, making it the ultimate example of paying premium prices for bragging rights that nobody actually cares about. But here's the ultimate insult that would make satirists weep with joy. It's not even the fastest, most powerful, or most advanced motorcycle you can buy, making it a spectacular failure on every measurable level. You're literally paying millions for the privilege of owning something that exists solely to separate the ultra-wealthy from their money while providing entertainment for the rest of us who can't believe such stupidity actually exists. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks regular supercars are too affordable, wants to make absolutely sure everyone knows they have more money than brains, and enjoys being the subject of conversations about wasteful spending and poor decision-making. The Heretic ES1 represents everything wrong with modern motorcycle culture. The triumph of price over performance, exclusivity over engineering, and marketing over meaningful innovation. If you buy one of these, you're not a motorcycle enthusiast. You're a walking advertisement for why wealth doesn't equal wisdom, and why some people shouldn't be allowed to make their own financial decisions. Want to see more motorcycle disasters? Click the video on your screen now to discover even more two-wheeled disasters that only complete idiots would buy.